It is Packers game day. Welcome in everybody to a brand new edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast here on YouTube. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can always follow me on Twitter at AndyHermanNFL. I am the owner and creator of the Pack-A-Day podcast, which you can find here on YouTube, of course, 365 days a year. You can also find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts, where we have a full team of some of your favorite Packer personalities podcasting 365 days a year, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If you're new to it, if you haven't checked it out yet, please make sure to do so. If you're new to this podcast here on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Going to be going over a couple different topics today. As always, I'll be going through my 3 keys to today's game. And then since I didn't do it yesterday, I'll also be going through the injury report and giving you a quick rundown on that as well. So let's start there. Let's start with the Chicago Bears and their injury report. And really, there's 2 names that you need to know. And I did mention both of these names yesterday as well. But that's Akiem Hicks, of course, and then Charles Leno, the left tackle. And 2 very, very good starters. Obviously, Hicks, a very dominant starter as a defensive tackle. Charles Leno, we're not going to argue and say he's one of the best left tackles in football by any means, but he's a very solid starting left tackle and certainly somebody that the Bears cannot afford to miss in this game. If you're not familiar and you haven't heard by now, the replacement for Charles Leno would be none other than Jason Spriggs, the former Packers left tackle, right tackle, second-round pick, never really worked out for Green Bay. That would be a huge difference going from Charles Leno to Jason Spriggs at that left tackle position, and would give a position where both Za'Darius Smith and Rashawn Gary could consistently target their offensive line as a whole, outside of Cody Whitehair, who also is having a little bit of a down year, is really beat up, is not very good, and Charles Leno is one of the lone stabilizing factors along that offensive line. You now put in Jason Spriggs in that spot, and everything is just thrown into a mess. This Bears offense is already really bad, and throwing a wrench into the left tackle position and potentially losing Charles Leno for this game would be a really key loss for the Bears. And then Akiem Hicks, very similarly to how the Packers defense revolves around Kenny Clark and what he's able to do as a defensive tackle. It's not all that dissimilar for Akiem Hicks and the Chicago Bears. Yes, Khalil Mack is the focal point for their defense, but Hicks is really what makes everything go. He's the run stuffer in the center of their defense. He's the player that is helping to collapse the pocket so Khalil Mack can come screaming off the edge and get some of those sacks and pressures that he so often gets. It frees up really Danny Trevathan and Roquan Smith playing behind Akiem Hicks. It just makes everyone along that defense better. Again, very similar to what Kenny Clark does for the Chicago Bears and Akiem Hicks. So both of those players insanely important to the Bears and their success in this game. Those are really the 2 names that you're going to want to keep an eye on as the inactives get announced, and see really if they're going to be able to play and make an impact in this game for the Bears. Of course, we already know Mitch Trubisky will be the quarterback. Nick Foles is doubtful for this game, so the only question at this point is he able to go as an emergency type quarterback? It seems unlikely, so either way, Mitch Trubisky going to be the starter in this game. Let's jump over to the Packers on this one. MVS, really the main questionable, sort of doubtful one in this game. He is listed as questionable, but he did not practice on Friday, which is never a good sign. LaFleur made mention that they'd give him until game time, but just based on how the Packers have been cautious with injuries so far this year, I think he's the most likely injury to be inactive. Now, I'm not including A.J. Dillon or Chris Barnes, who did not get activated on Saturday, so they will be inactive once again on Sunday for the game. Still on the COVID injury list, so both of those players still not going to be available, but MVS is the main questionable in this game that I think you really have to consider, probably a little bit more closer to doubtful than questionable in this game. Then they had 5 other players who were listed as questionable, including Tyler Ervin, Josh Jackson, Kevin King, Corey Linsley, and Equinemius St. Brown. It seems like there's good news for all of them here. First of all of them practiced in some capacity on Friday. Secondly, no cornerbacks were pulled up from the practice squad, which is a really good sign. You got to think if either Kevin King or Josh Jackson were going to be unable to go in this game, that they probably would have pulled up a corner. So I think that's a very good sign that both of those players are going to be able to play. I think you can say the same thing about the wide receivers. If MVS and Tyler Ervin and Equinemius St. Brown were all doubtful or out in this game, that would really leave Green Bay with just Adams, Lazard, who's probably on a snap count still, and then Malik Taylor and Darius Shepard. So I think there's a very good chance that they have a good feeling that a couple of those guys are going to be able to go. I've got a feeling that both Equinemius St. Brown and hopefully Tyler Ervin are able to go in this game as well. I think the big thing with Tyler Ervin is he at a point where he can actually be a kick returner and punt returner still, or is he just more of a gadget player on offense, and maybe they don't trust him back there yet to return punts and kicks based on where he's at with his injury? If that's the case, that's still a major loss for the special teams, who just haven't been the same since Tyler Ervin's been out as both the punt returner and kick returner. So I think that's where Green Bay really stands right now in an injury standpoint. Again, I would expect MVS, I would lean towards him not playing in this game. I think everyone else seems to have a very good shot. And then for Corey Linsley, Matt LaFleur mentioned earlier this week that it seemed like Linsley was trending in the right direction and going to be able to play. So hopefully that is the case as well. You never know with back injuries. They can linger. They can fire up at any time, and you just don't know when that's going to happen. So hopefully Linsley's, going to be able to give it a go. He's such a key, huge key part in the center of that Packers offensive line. Yes, Elton Jenkins, Lucas Patrick provide great depth there, but you definitely want Corey Linsley in there if at all possible. All right, let's jump over to my 3 keys to today's game. And I think you have to start with the defensive game plan. And I think this is really interesting, and I think this is worth digging into just a little bit longer, because Mike Pettin and this Packers defense so far, their goal all season long has been trying to force the opposing team to go, the length of the field, dink and dunk, not give up big plays, and make them not make mistakes on their way to a 12 to 14 play, 70, 75 yard drive. That's their goal. Their belief is that at some point between, when you get the ball and the Packer in the end zone, that you're going to make some mistakes, or the Packers are going to make a play on the ball. They're going to get a sack. You're going to have a holding penalty. And Green Bay is eventually going to be able to get off the field, or they're going to be able to make you kick a field goal and knock it in the end zone. That hasn't worked well throughout the course of the season, and I think everyone can see that Green Bay's defense needs to be a bit more aggressive. I would love to see Green Bay come out and press Chicago and be more aggressive and not give Mitch Trubisky any easy completions. I think that's a smart game plan in this game. However, you can also make a very strong argument that against Mitch Trubisky and the Bears, that the initial game plan likely works really well, that you really want to make Mitch Trubisky go the length of the field, 70, 75 yards, and make him, complete consecutive passes, make this offensive line that's completely beat up, protect against Za'Darius and Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark without holding, without committing any offsides penalties, etc. And really the Bears' only 2 weapons that are going to give you any reason for concern, Allen Robinson on the one side, and then Darnell Mooney, who, if you're not familiar, I think it was 5th or 6th round pick. Loved him coming out of college. Speedster on the outside, runs really strong routes, and can definitely be a threat deep. Those are your only 2 that you really have any concern about. And all you want to make sure is that both Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney don't get those big explosive plays. So you can make an argument that it actually makes sense in this game for Green Bay to be a bit more cautious and play a little bit back more and make Mitch Trubisky beat you with his arm. And I go back and forth. I see the reason why maybe you'd want to make that happen, and maybe you'd make Mitch Trubisky want to go the length of the field and make sure that Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson aren't beating you deep. On the same token, I trust the corners. I trust Jair. I trust Kevin King. I trust those guys to be able to shut down those Bears wide receivers. I think the safeties play really well in those situations and not allowing big plays. And I want this Green Bay defense to start playing aggressive. And let's be real, if you can't be aggressive against this very abysmal, very awful Chicago Bears offense with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback, a beat-up offensive line, Jimmy Graham at tight end, David Montgomery at running back, Matt Nagy, giving up play calling ability, this offense is a mess. It's a nightmare. Probably the worst or second worst offense, just competing with the New York Jets as to who's the worst offense in the NFL. You want to be aggressive, and you want to be able to shut down the Bears in this game. I think this has got to be a huge game for this defense and Mike Pettin, and really controlling the Bears, making sure that Mitch Trubisky beats you with his arm and not with his legs. Don't let him get out of the pocket. Don't let him scramble. Don't let him use his athleticism. Make him throw on the run, get pressure on him. He's terrible when pressured. And ultimately, even though I think you want to make Mitch Trubisky beat you the length of the field and dink and dunk and make smart decisions because he's not shown that he's capable of doing that. I want to see this Packers defense be aggressive, and I think that's 1A in this game. Number 2, again, this is always my low-hanging fruit one, but you got to control Khalil Mack. I think Billy Turner has shown some signs lately that maybe he isn't quite as sharp as he was earlier this season. He's showing a little bit of I don't know if weakness is the right word, but you can see a couple holes in his game over the course of the last couple weeks. He's allowed some more pressures, hasn't been quite as sound overall, and Khalil Mack, you can bet, is going to be lined up a lot over Billy Turner. They're not going to want to match him up a ton against David Bakhtiari, and frankly, Robert Quinn and David Bakhtiari is a good matchup as well. So I really think that in this game, Khalil Mack has got to be a main focus, and what you don't want to have to do is chip with tight ends and running backs and things like that. So this is a really big game for Billy Turner. You want to be able to run your offense. You don't want him to just be creating havoc and wrecking the game and making it so that you have to use extra players to control him. But at the same token, no matter what, you can't let him be the player that ruins this game. You have to make other players on that Bears defense beat you. So I think you really got to have an extra set of eyes and an extra focus on Khalil Mack, especially if he gets going and Billy Turner's not able to control him one-on-one. And then last but not least, you got to start to establish Aaron Jones in some capacity. There's no way that he should only have one game over 100 yards rushing on the season. I know he's been hurt a little bit. I know they've been kind of keeping his wear and tear down a little bit. But at some point, you really need to get him going. He's a phenomenal football player. And yeah, I don't think if Akeem Hicks is playing and all of a sudden it's really tough to run on this Bears defense, I don't think you just want to keep running it with Aaron Jones because you want to get him going. But there are ways to get Aaron Jones going, whether it's in the screen game, whether it's as a spread out wide in the slot. He can run some of those jet motions and sweeps, getting him involved in some toss plays, some runs up the middle, doing a variety of different things to keep the Bears, off tilt and just making sure that, they don't expect what's coming next. I think they've got to be using Aaron Jones in a variety of different ways. The Bears are going to try to take away Davante Adams in this game, and I just think it's very, very important that at this part of the season, as we start winding down more cold games, they got 4 games left in Green Bay, 1 left in Chicago in cold weather, that you start getting Aaron Jones very involved in this game plan and start getting him really going, start getting him some 30, 40-yard runs. I'd love to see him break one in this game. I think it's time to get Jones going, hopefully early and often, and he can be the kind of guiding force in this game for the Packers and their offense. A small one at the end, a bonus one. It's also really time to regain home field advantage. People should hate going to Lambeau in December, in January, I guess technically still November, late November when it's cold, and you don't want to go up to Lambeau Field. It's time to take that back. They've been really lackadaisical at home, both against Minnesota and Jacksonville these last couple weeks. It's time to take that back. I would love to see just another one of those 42-0 halftime scores against a really bad Chicago Bears team. I mentioned yesterday all the reasons why I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Bears are going to be very motivated in this game, but I would love to see Green Bay come out, reclaim that home field advantage, and just show the rest of the NFL that if you're coming to Lambeau, it's going to be a pain in the ass, and they're going to give you everything they got to make your trip a living nightmare while you're visiting the great city of Green Bay, Wisconsin. All right, that's going to do it for me. I think Packers win by 6 in this one. I think it's a little bit closer than people expect. Packers still come out on top. Don't lose 2 in a row again under Matt LaFleur. It still has not happened. I'm expecting that to remain the case this week. I hope you enjoy the game. I hope you enjoy your full Sunday slate of games, including the Broncos having to play without a quarterback, because what else could go wrong and happen in 2020? Should be an interesting day of football. Enjoy it. I'll be back here tomorrow on the Pack-A-Day podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, as well as here on YouTube. And until next time, and as always, go Pack, go.